Okay, now from this video, we'll start writing up the actual codes for our custom plugins, Gazebo Sim plugins. But before even we start writing the code, let's understand few of the things from the documentation. Those are very important related to uh, this system plugins. Okay, so these 3 points that I've mentioned here, those are really important that you need to understand from documentation. Let me open them one by one. First one is Gazebo Sim. It has everything inside it, and as you can see, it's GZ Sim Entity Component Manager. This is also important than this component. So let's talk about this. This is entirely everything that we are going to talk around the system would be under GZ Sim. And then here we have the component that I've already opened over here. This is one of the important class that basically it has all the components related things that we were talking about to write and read on the component and everything related to component. And the other one is this. If you check entity component manager, so this all are within this. So I've also opened this entity component manager over here. So let's understand one by one what are the main importance of this. So we'll understand this entity component system more now once we start writing up the code, and we'll see the details of it. But let's first see what is component. For example, if I search anything like name, if we go down, so this I was searching for this name component. So you will see this, how this name component is there. It's using names that user defined. These things are there. Then within the component, this is first the data, and this is tag, and this is serializer. So I've written over here as well that what is component is actually. So it is either it has data type, so basically whatever the data type of it is, and then it has a class tag, so so that we can differentiate with others. And then this is serializer, so either it looks like this or it looks like this. Every component looks like this. So the serializer over here that you're seeing, it's just for data transferring. It's not so important for our use case. It's just being used for serializing and deserializing data. So if you see some of the example, if you see this over here that I just explained, this is the data type, the standard string, and this is the name. And how we access this, suppose this is X, so how we access this, using name, using this component, then scope resolution operator, then X. Same I mentioned, if we how we access this component of name, we write like this. Same goes for linear velocity, like this. And then if you see, even on the details is written what it does. So let me show over here as well. So if you see, this linear velocity is there, so its data type is of vector. It's of type vector. The data type of this, because we, as we discussed in the last video, what is component is basically the data type, right? The data type of this is just a vector. For this linear velocity is just vector, and it has got type, it doesn't have serialization, it's fine. So over here it's written what it does. It contains the linear velocity of the component. If you see, this linear velocity is there, and then there is one CMD over here. Whenever CMD written in generally on, if you ever reading Gazebo documentation, you will understand that CMD is basically for commanding that. So that means if you want to read the velocity, linear velocity, then you will use this linear velocity. If you want to write on that, then you will use this CMD option. So this CMD things are mostly for writing. Okay, like this, what you have to understand all of this. So this is how all components are defined. So every component that we are going to use on this entire series, or if you ever see any systems plugin code, then this are the component space that where everything is defined. It is under Gazebo Sim components. Okay, now how actually it gets the component. So the main thing that starts with whenever we start writing is, firstly, what it does is, so if you see, so this entity is there, right? So this entity has this component, model, name, pose, static, and these are all values of it. And if you see, this model is there, and also this is also as a model. This is done sometimes to understand if what kind of data type is it. Okay, we'll understand that in a bit, but the important point is here, what happens, how firstly you need to get this number out, because this is a number that you use for identifying the entity, right? So every time the first step that we do before doing any other, that we first find the entity. We find the entity means we find this number actually. So how we find this? So we say that if something, it has name component inside like xyz value, then get us this component. Or there is some other ways, like if it has pose of this value, or if it has all these things, or if it of model type. So basically even model is an entity also as added as type, so that we can validate if this entity is of type model or is it of some other type. That for that reason this is added. Okay, so but the important thing is how you find entity is by using component, or there are some other ways. Let's see them as well. So if we go down, so this is a common page that you're seeing over here. So here I've added some of the common code. Every time starting of the plugin will discuss some of the commonly used codes, and I've added all of them here, and I will keep on adding on as we proceed on to the video series. So let's start with this example. So if you see over here, it's the .hdf file, the world file. So the important thing is if it is attached with the component, then this configure has this entity, right? So it actually points to this model. Okay, so let's understand this in much more detail with an example of print entity component. Okay, code. Okay, now let's come to this, and this print entity system plugin is, this is the .hh file of it that has all the class definition declaration, sorry, all the class declaration and other things. And then this is .cc file that has all the class definition and other function details, and function are defined over here. So let's understand them one by one. Okay, so how the code start is, firstly we include some header files like every other C++ program, but here the header files is based on what function we are writing. We include the header file. Always system needs to be there for inheriting all the system things. Like for inheriting all of this, you need to have the system. Okay, and then because on this we are going to print the name, we have this component name of print. So this is basically this same component that we were talking about here on this name component that you see, right? So this name component is the one that's there. So this name components come from this h file. Then for registering, for adding plugins aliases, we have this header file. Then this are, because everything is defined within Gazebo Sim systems, so everything that we want to use, as we saw, it is under Gazebo Sim. So that's why we are using this namespace gz, then same, then systems, because it's a system plugin, right? So all this namespace are there because of that reason. Then this is the name of the class print entity, and this inherit that we just discussed in the previous video what these are. So because although I'm not going to use this pre-update, I'm just going to use configure to print once which entity it attached to, so that I can explain you the thing just that we just discussed over here related to how to get entity directly from this configure. So for that I'm using this code to explain you that concept. And as we discussed, we need to configure because we have configure, pre-update, as we have pre-update, and then this is to get the model name, this is to get the target entity thing. Same for here, these are all defined, simple, nothing special. Now on the C++ file, because we are using this namespace, we also need to have this namespace there. Okay, on C++ file we add our h file location, and then this all are there, and then these are just constructor and destructor of this derived class that I've defined over here. And the main code is here. This is the important part that we just talked about. What was that? So what is this configure entity actually means? So if your plugin on .hdf file, that's the world file or model file, whatever it is, if it is attached like this within the world, so if this is the world, okay, this is defined like world, okay, and inside that it is directly defined on the world tag, then this entity, the thing entity over here is actually pointing to this world. Okay, so this constant entity is the entity of the world. Okay, same goes if this plugin, if the same plugin, exactly same plugin is attached within a model definition. So world is there, then inside that model is there, right? So if it attached to the model, then the same entity is actually pointing to this model. So this is very important. The same way HDF also point up, but we'll discuss that in next video. But here the thing is, on this configure, this entity, what actually means is like it defines wherever you attach. So if you have, like for example, not just this model entity, if you have this light and you define within the light, if you define your plugin inside the light, that means it is going, your entity, this entity is going to point to this light. So this is what this entity does over here. So now this is also clear. Now on the code again, then this entity is there. Then we have this entity component manager, this class that we were talking about, this entity component manager, this is that class, right? So this configure gives you this entity component manager, and as we want to print the name of the model that attached to as well as their ID, how we are going to do that's basically what we are going to do in print entity system plugin. So it will print the entity number as well as the name of that entity depending on where it is attached, right? So now this line of code is very important. So let me show you component on this entity component manager. So entity component manager main job is to link with component and entity, to manage entity and component. You can understand this way as well. So if you see, so if you have big documentation, then we find out things like this. So if you see here, so everything is component, but if you see here, so these are the two classes that available for component. Okay, so if you go inside this component, you will understand that this component, what's written over here is it get you a component assigned to this. What that means is, if you see this code, let's come back to this code. So basically what we are seeing over here is, yeah, so let's understand this line of code. What it does is, what is this line is actually doing, based on the entity, it's trying to find the name. How we got the entity? Because we know from the configure, we know where the entity is attached, right? So based on that entity, we are trying to find out the name. So basically what we are saying over here is, if this is a model, okay, if this is a model like this, then there is some name attached to it, and maybe its value is A, B, C, whatever it is. We already know this number, whatever this number is, we already know this number. We now want to understand what's the value of this. Like for example, this value, how we know this? For that we use dot component, and dot component, I say, it gets you the value of that component. And here if you see, this data thing is defined over here, and from where this data is coming, we'll understand that also in a minute. So if you see this component, actually what it returns you a component type. So it returns you a component. So this data is somewhere defined within that component. Okay, we'll see it in a minute. And what is the data type of that component? The data type is standard string. So this is that component data type, right? So now get back to here and let's see what is that component. And within the components, we have this component class. So basically where this dot data thing is coming from, this dot data is like, we have this name, it gives you the name, but why we need to do this dot data thing, that is we're trying to understand. So if you go inside the components and then you go onto the component, then you will see this component has this data defined over here, that and in our case we are just reading it, so it's a constant value. That's it. Oh, okay, name is there, so it may or may not be constant, so maybe we can change the name as well. So it's just the data. Because of that, this data, so this data is actually coming up from here. This dot data thing is coming from here, from this data. So what your component is returning you, and on this component is basically returning when a component type, and this component, then this actual data is within dot data. We just saw this, right? So it's within this dot data. So I hope this is also clear. And by mistakenly I've written this standard optional. This is not standard optional. That's the logic of that is what I just told you. I'll correct this out. Sorry for that. It happens. So yeah. And then once you're done with this, once you have written the entire code at the end, if you see this entire code, once you have written the entire code at the end, you need to add you have to register this plugin so that your Gazebo Sim understand that this is a plugin, and what it has the system, then it has configure, and it has pre-update. Okay, so that's a very simple thing. But the important concept was here was this entity, how and what it attach. And the other thing is this. Now this alias thing is also very important. So this alias thing, what is this alias? Let me explain you this alias. So this is the alias name that you must. So this name that you've written on your C++ file, that needs to be there while you're defining this name. This needs to be exactly matching. So if you add one over here, then this will become wrong. Okay, so you have to be careful that this name entirely matches up with this. So this is one important thing. And then from where this file thing is coming, file thing basically comes on the CMake file list when you define this lines over here and this over here, and this everything you have defined a name onto it. Okay, so when your code is made, it needs to have this name, otherwise it won't be able to find out the plugin. So it won't be able to find the plugin if this is not correct, even if your name alias name is also not correct. So these are very important, and it has to be fixed based on how you write the code. If I write ABC over here, you can write ABC and it will able to detect. And if I write XYZ over here, then I have to write XYZ over here. So this is one way. Otherwise you have this .so file. This is the main name. When we build the code, it comes like this, that you need to also define. Okay, now let's actually go inside the code and let's run that code. So this was the code that I'm talking about, and what we are looking at standalone Gazebo Sim plugins. So that means there are two things that we are going to start with. Firstly, what we are looking at standalone plugins that you do not need ROS or anything to make them work, that can directly work by building up, and we'll understand how to build up in a minute. And then we'll gradually go from here, we'll go to this ROS workspace and we'll use and build our code on ROS. So this is not important at the moment, this is important, and we are looking at print entity system plugin. And this is the H file that I just explained you entirely, and this is the C++ file, the same C++ file that I also explained you just minutes ago, and everything that's here. So what is happening on this, we are getting the entity, and based on whether it's attached to whatever model, world, light, whatever, it is going to give us this target entity. Then when we give this target entity, we are going to get back our name, and we are just printing name and this target entity, and we will see this target entity is just a number. Okay, and in pre-update we are doing nothing, just it pauses up and returns when it's pre-update. Nothing we are doing over here. We'll gradually see what to do on pre-update on next video. And then we register this, then this is there. Now the other thing is on the build, that you need to have these things as it is copied. This is, it tells you which C++ version is using. It's depending on which Gazebo version you're using. So basically I'm using Harmonic, so that uses Gazebo Sim 3 and then plugin 2, like those. You need to add all those things to build up your code, and it uses Gazebo Sim 8. That's, as I say, Gazebo Sim Harmonic, and this is the code. This adds the library, sets the target. We are, as I was saying, C++ 17 is the target, and then this is the target link. It is making this, and then this builds up the code. Okay, so this CMake list is just for building up the code, and we'll see where to build up the code, how to build up the code. For that, it's common for all the codes that we are going to do for Gazebo standalone plugins. So if you go on this common, you'll find all of this, how to build this. So basically we need to go inside this first, then we'll build up the code using CMake. Okay, now first let's start our container. Docker, sorry, docker start gazebo bash. Oh, my bad. Should not be writing bash, sorry. We started the container, then we go inside the container. Now we go inside the container. As we have to use GUI, we have to do xhost plus. We inside the container. Now we need to go to the standalone plugins where everything related to it is defined. So we go inside this, then as we want to see this print entity system plugin, so it just prints the entity details. Okay, that's the plugin thing. And then we have this all files over here. Then we need to make a build folder, so we'll do build folder. This is how general C++ codes are compiled in Linux, right? So it's nothing special. It's how normal any C++ code compiles on Linux. So we go on build, then we have to do firstly cmake, and it will just make build enable, then we'll do make, and this will actually build the code. It will build our .so file, it will link it up, and our so file is ready. So that I was saying that .so file, from where that .so file things comes in. So this is that .so file. So this is a name that you can also put on your SDF file. This is the world file. So if you know, from Gazebo Classic it was .world. From Gazebo Sim, even the world file has converted into .sdf, and even model file is like that. So this is the world file. On this world file I've added this plugin over here. So our plugin is added, and instead of this name we can also write this entire name. So whenever this plugin is get searched, either it's searched from this name or it's searched from this name. Because of that reason you need to have this name. Now let's go back, and one more important step over here is that it always looks for the custom plugin on this path. So we need to export this path for our case, otherwise it won't look into this. So if we do this, so this is basically one variable that Gazebo Sim looks into it to find the Gazebo Sim class. So we basically said that inside this, go inside our build file, there you will find our .so file of the plugin. So let me echo this so that you can also see this. See, it's over here. So we have echoed this. So every time we are using any of the plugin, every time we need to set the path correctly. Otherwise it may happen that if you haven't set the path, then your plugin may not load. So now just start our SDF file. We'll write Gazebo Sim v4 for debugging and every other thing. If something odd comes in, we'll be able to see this. We'll write our SDF file name, that's basically the world file name, and then we launch it. Oh, so it didn't launch. Why? Okay, we saw some issue over here that this is not able to do this, but why? So let's echo the display. It's a good thing that this error is coming and I'm getting a chance to explain you this. And did we not do xhost plus? We did do this. So let's do echo display on this side. Let's see what is the display over here. Oh, so our display is 0 and here it is 1. That's causing the problem. Okay, so we need to export the display. This is just issue with how you have set up your display thing. So on display, basically I will try to make this much better so that it doesn't cause you a problem. But let's see, because this error comes in, let me explain you how to resolve this. So basically this both ID needs to be same. Okay, so we'll make this display inside as well as same as outside. So we'll use this, and then our outside display is 0. So we set the same thing inside and outside both. Now let's launch our plugin, and then once we launch, we are able to see this, and then we should see some of the prints over here. So yeah, here are the prints that we defined on this C file, that whenever you start, it says started, plugin started. So you'll see this print over here. And also we have set the entity value. So the value of the entity is basically, what is the value of this entity? It is 1. Why? Because this is 1 because right now the plugin is directly attached to the world, and this world is obviously the entity number is 1 for that world, right? So this because of that, it gives you printout as world, and the name of that entity is print world 1. So this is the name of this entity. That also confirm that this is a world entity. Okay, Now if we do the same thing and we add the same plugin, exactly everything is same. I'm not changing anything inside this plugin. On this, everything is same with this. So we should be able to see two prints now. So now this is there. Now if I do Control C, it says once the destructor is called, the plugin is killed. Better. Now let's launch this. Yep. So see, this two times the plugin is loading because we have defined this plugin two times, once in the model and once in the world. And then when we don't need to play it, it's fine. And here on this, it's saying entity one. So this is print coming from the world. See, and then over here this plugin started, and this is coming from this model. So value of this model entity is value 8. That's why we are on print, we are getting value as 8, and the name of this is test cube. Because of that, we are getting the entity name as test cube. So this is attached to the world and this is attached to the model. So I hope even this is clear to you. So there are some things that's common over here, and this concept is very important to get how configuration is being set. In this, now we understood how this entity thing is set. Slowly we'll understand how SDF is set, and then we use this up in the next video. But one more interesting thing that I want to show you before I end this video up, like I faced this up when, for example, if you do not add this up, these are essential plugins, right? Because you're giving a new part to the plugin, this doesn't get loaded up automatically. And if I do this, nothing is coming over here. This is expected to happen because everything related to our plugin, still you will get the planes, still you will get everything out here, still you get the print, everything is same. But the thing is that nothing is visible because all essential plugins are no more added up. So this is critical, that you need to add this essential plugins. You need to add this essential plugins so that it doesn't cause you problem. And now everything loads up. Okay, and one more important thing over here is that if I unset this variable, if you haven't set this variable for your plugin, for example, if I unset this, now if I echo this plugin, you won't get anything over here. If you are in this state and you launch this plugin, then you are supposed to get this error. It's saying it because you have loaded plugin 2 times, right? So it's going to give you 2-time error. It's saying that it could not find this library because it was looking into that variable that we didn't set this variable. I have unset to show you this. So Gazebo Sim systems plugin, that variables needs to be set it up. If it is not there, and also it needs to have the correct path. I'm setting not inside build, I'm setting it up within where my plugin is, and where your plugin is, you need to just copy it down. So if your plugin doesn't load, make sure you're looking at this Gazebo Sim system plugin path. So basically it is the path that Gazebo Sim looks for it. Now if I launch this, everything will work fine, and you won't know, this time you won't get the error. Okay, so I hope a lot of the things from this simple example is very clear to you. In next video, we'll slowly add on the things onto this simple plugin and we'll make a good plugins following up. But there are common things that you can look into the code, like some common APIs that I was talking about, this common APIs, and I will keep on adding other things on it. And then this common thing that you need to be careful, that you need to go inside this, that you need to build up all the codes. This is being how done in all the codes, and these are the things you need to take care. And this even code related thing that I have explained you, this entity of world and model thing, you need to be careful about all these common things. Okay, then also this plugin things that I've told you. So everything that I told you, in next video I'm going to assume that you already know this. Okay, so I'm not going to repeat these things up, because we'll talk about the important things of that plugin. We won't talk about anymore on the common things. So make sure that you understand all of these common things very clearly that I just explained in this video. Okay.